All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Babbles Nonsense podcast, where I am flying solo today and we're diving into something that's probably going to sting a little bit, but in the best way possible. So we're going to talk about accountability, and not the kind that shames you, not the kind that sends you into a spiral of regret, but the kind that sets you free, the kind that lets you finally stop repeating the same relationship cycles, the kind that says, okay, maybe it wasn't all them. Maybe I played a role in this. And maybe that role came from the wounds that I haven't fully healed from yet. And maybe we're going to talk about how it can kind of shine a mirror onto us. So let's get into it. So for me, I'm someone that, used to think that accountability meant that I had to take all the blame, and I was very guilty of that. Still am pretty guilty of that. And I'm talking about any relationship, whether that be with your family, dating, romantic, platonic, friendships, whatever the relationship may be. It doesn't have to be a romantic one. I was very guilty of taking all the blame. Like if somebody got upset, if I was automatically like, what did I do? And it was never like, maybe I didn't do something. And that's something I'm having to work on. So that's why I wanted to do this episode, was because I felt like I do take a lot of accountability, and I have been in partnerships or relationships or even friendships where I am blamed the entire time. And then like looking back, going through therapy and stuff like that, I realized that I wasn't the only one to blame. Like there was two parties here. And I know the old saying goes, there's always three sides of the story. There's your side, my side, and the truth, right? But anyways, we all know that saying. So let's get back to the accountability portion of it. So for me, true accountability is saying, I see what I allowed. I see what I ignored. I see how I abandoned myself to keep someone else comfortable. It's not saying they were perfect and I ruined it. Because let's be honest, if you're listening to this, you've probably been with someone who is emotionally unavailable, inconsistent, selfish, or even straight up hurtful to you. Maybe they were physically or verbally abusive, and no one deserves that. Ever. There's no excuse for it, because also I think as human beings, we have to start learning how to talk to other people and communicate. And I understand that there is trauma that everyone is working around, but at the end of the day, we have to decide what we allow, because that does teach someone how to treat us. And I'm bad about it. It's so crazy, because I mentioned this multiple times on the podcast, that in my work life, I am so confident, and I don't really allow that type of behavior, and I put a stop to it, and I have a lot of boundaries in my professional life, but in my personal life, I don't. Like, I, for whatever reason, will let certain people walk all over me, and I haven't figured out truly why it's certain people and then not others, but I think there's probably some kind of trauma bond there from something I haven't worked through in my childhood. Something else to talk about in therapy. But this podcast is also very therapeutic, because it helps me just talk out things, and then I'm like, oh, wow, okay, I see something. But going back to the accountability, is saying, like, when you do stay too long, or maybe you followed and chased potential in someone, or you stayed in an unhealthy, toxic relationship. Accountability is saying, I stayed and I hoped, I kept trying to prove I was worth staying for. I thought if I loved harder, it would fix it. Like, owning why you stayed and not blaming yourself, knowing that you did everything you could in the moment that you had and the tools that you had at that time. And I think that we have to look at patterns that we, do in relationships. I think that many of us have many patterns, like falling for potential. I talked about that just a minute ago. Confusing emotional chaos with passion, mistaking inconsistency for mystery, and then chasing unavailable people because we secretly believe we're the ones who aren't enough. And I learned that, like, I know when I worked with me and you a lot, like I would be like, I think the reason why I chase emotionally unavailable men is because I'm probably emotionally unavailable myself. And it's something that I have to get real with myself and be like, what do you want when it comes to dating? And it's crazy because I truly think I don't know. Like sometimes I'm like, I really want a relationship and I want to be in a committed relationship. And then sometimes I'm like, that kind of scares me. I've been alone for a really long time and I've lived by myself for 18 years now. And I don't know, like bringing someone into that does like terrify me. And then it's like, I don't want children. Not that I don't like children. I love children. I just personally don't want them myself. And then at the age that I am, like I'm 2 years away from 40. So the age bracket that I'm dating with, it's like they're going to have children and that's fine. I just personally didn't want to physically have children. Maybe I'll do a whole podcast on why one day. And so like learning someone else's routine or their children and stuff like that, like as you get older, that does terrify me a little bit, but I know I can do it. I just have to do more work on myself. Anyways, going back to the patterns that like some of us have, and I feel like the chasing potential or falling for potential, and then especially the confusing that emotional chaos with passion is definitely two that I've seen in a lot of people when I've talked to them or that has resonated with people listening to this podcast. I know that for a long time, because my childhood was so chaotic, that's what I thought love was. So that's what I chased a lot. I was like, oh, this is familiar. It's a familiar pattern because if something was stable, it was boring and I didn't want it. And I didn't think that was a normal thing because I didn't grow up with an emotional secure parents or any kind of like parental figure where that was like a stable environment. But as I've gotten older and I've reconnected with some older family members and see different families that, throughout my college career and whatnot, that is normal and it's hard. It's hard to understand it. But we keep going through these cycles because we haven't sat down and really asked, like, what am I trying to fix in them that I haven't healed in me? And I think that that's a huge statement. Like whenever, and this has been something a therapist told me one time, is like whenever something is really bothering you that someone else is doing, typically they're mirroring either something that you have healed and worked on and that used to be you, or something that you're currently going through yourself that you either don't want to admit that you also do it, or you do it and you need to fix it. So it's always like a mirror held up to you. And I know I have a friend that, we get in fights all the time. And she won't care that if I say this to her, I'm obviously not going to share her name, but she tends to stay in the pessimistic, negative mind frame a lot. And I used to do that all the time. I used to be like, I'm not pessimistic. I'm a realist. So yeah. And when we became friends, we kind of bonded because that's how I was and that's how she is. Well, she's still there. And ever since I've done like the energy healing and the life coaching with me and you, I've grown so much. I realized that a lot of things are what we put into the universe, we're going to get back, and how we truly think about things is really what you're putting out there, and it's going to keep coming back to you. And I've learned that. And so my personality has shifted a little bit. Now, don't get me wrong. I can still have those moments where I can get down and be pessimistic, but majority of the time I try to not be, or I try to be like, okay, well, this happened. Yes, it sucked, but what is the positives that could come out of it? What's the things that we could learn from it? And she's still not there yet. So we will bump heads a lot all the time. And it infuriates me. And I think it's because I once was like that, and it's holding a mirror up to me. And I was like, gosh, is this what I was like? And so it's showing me how my other friends felt about it when they used to be like, gosh, Shauna, like, let's be a little bit more positive. So a lot of times it is just a mirror, being held up to us. And that's kind of hard to admit. But when we start to recognize it, not the shame, like don't put shame on yourself, but with compassion. And I think that's where the growth lives. I think that we can all it's almost like that aha moment where you're like, this is it. You know what I'm saying? And then we also have to learn to love ourselves more. And I say that because I am really bad about putting other people first, or And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. Like, obviously there's reasons and times for it, but I think that sometimes I consistently do it in a relationship and I keep giving and giving and giving, and they may not even be giving anything back, but I'm still giving, and I need to recognize that, hey, like, this is definitely a mismatch in energy here. But also when we do that, I think it's because maybe we don't have the confidence that we want, or maybe we don't love ourselves. So we're trying to get them to validate us in a way. And the truth is we don't have to do that anymore. Okay. So here's the shift I want to hear today. Taking accountability shouldn't make you love yourself less. It should make you love yourself more, because you're doing hard work. And because when you realize the ways that you've hurt yourself just to feel loved by someone else, you start to realize you are always worth more. I know I have. I know that, yes, it may take me 20 to 40 times in the same situationship or relationship to realize I was chasing potential, or I was, confusing that emotional chaos with love. And then the third thing was that I was trying to get validation from this person, because I don't know if y'all listened to the episode. I don't know if y'all have listened to the episode that I've mentioned it a few times on the podcast, talking about my childhood. I mentioned it recently with Chris Medina when we did our astrology podcast that, the last thing I said to my dad when I was 10 years old is that I hated him. And I have lived with that. And so a lot of times I don't like relationships or conversations or anything ending badly, because you just never know what's going to happen in life. And that's just something I'm going to have to work through, because sometimes things just do have to end badly. And I think that what I've learned from that is that I don't have to be mean and hurtful, but still being able to get my point across is okay to do. It's okay to say how you're feeling, and you just don't have to deliver it in a mean or rude way. And that's something I'm working through. And then I've also mentioned when I, a lot of childhood trauma that I had, I was just teased a lot by my own family, my sisters and my brothers. They would either make fun of the way I looked or something like that. So I did grow up with very low self-esteem and low, self-confidence. And that over probably the past 2 to 3 years has definitely grown. And I think the more that has grown, the more I have loved myself more and stood up for myself more. And anyways, getting off on a tangent. But going back to learning to love yourself more, I think that when we realize the ways that we've hurt our own selves just to feel loved by someone else, we start to realize that we are always worth more than that situation. And I think it sometimes just takes hard things in our lives. And I mean, that's just what life is about, is ups and downs. But just knowing that if you've been there, you weren't dumb, you weren't naive, you were just trying to meet a need in the only way that you know how at the moment. Like I said, and me and you has said this too on podcast episode, is that sometimes we do the best that we can with the toolbox that we have at the moment. But the biggest thing is once you've learned and you're aware, then what you're not choosing, what you're not changing, you're choosing. But it's also, with that said, it's not that you're going to change overnight. If you've had a pattern, I'm 37. So I've had a pattern for 37 years, and to unlearn that or to learn to grow out of it, number one, you have to be aware of it. Number two, you have to seek professional help. Trying to do it on your own when you're the one who has this pattern is almost near impossible, because how do you fix a pattern that is your pattern? You can't. You either need a therapist, a life coach, someone who specializes in the mental health field that can help you. And learning those new ways, that's powerful, that's self-respect, and that is growth. We don't have to fix this all overnight. Like I said, if you've dealt with something for several years in a row, it's going to take time. And I don't know about y'all, but I'm a type A personality, so I want it fixed that first time. And I always feel like I took 2 steps forward and then maybe 1 step back, but I'm still 1 step ahead. And I don't realize that sometimes because I focus on, I took a step back. You know what I'm saying? And And you don't have to become that hyper independent, I don't need anybody version of yourself. I know a lot of women not recently, but in the past few years, that's what we do, like Miss Independent. And sometimes, that's a huge turnoff for men, I feel like, because we are supposed to be more in our feminine energy. And, that would bring out a masculine energy in a male. But also, guys, I get it. There's a lot of feminine energy men these days that don't want to be doing the masculine stuff, and you're like, fine, I can just do it. And I get it. And sometimes we're just like, I don't need anybody. But the more you give that energy off, then people aren't going to approach you. And I was that way for a really long time because and again, came from childhood trauma. I had to learn to do everything myself at such a young age. I was very self-sufficient. Then I, got a job, went to college, got a better job, and started making more money. And then the longer I did it by myself, the longer that's when I got set in this, I don't need anybody. But now it's like more so that emotional connection. I think that we all do need emotional connection. And as good as AI is, trust me, like as good as it is, it's never going to replace like a human being, I think that we just have to be more honest, especially with ourselves, and ask ourselves, like, what did I ignore? What did I accept that made me feel small? What am I still grieving? What can I do differently next time? And then we have to forgive ourselves. And true forgiveness means forgive yourself and allow yourself to grow. And you're going to have to do that over and over and over again as long as you need to. Maybe it's something you ask yourself every day. Maybe you start journaling on it. Because the truth is you're not behind, you're becoming and you're growing and you're learning just as I am. Like, I'm not an expert in any way in dating, in relationships, in friendships. But the one thing that I'll say that I love about myself, and the one thing that I will always, I'm very introspective. Like, I can truly look at a situation from a 360 view. That's where I get myself in trouble a lot, because I'll be like, well, it was all my fault. And that's where I have to try to, when I'm looking at it from a 360 view, I have to look at the other person's behavior too and realize, like, hey, these are patterns in them that they're not, changing. And as much as we want to change someone, the truth is, guys, is we can't change anyone. We can barely change ourselves. So we just have to realize that we can't always change someone, and they have to want to do the work. But maybe sometimes losing you or losing something that they really loved is unfortunately the catalyst that will get the change happening. But anyways, I'll end it there. So if no one's told you today, you are allowed to be both a work in progress and worthy of love right now. You're allowed to change the story. You're allowed to say, I deserve better, and actually believe in it. And yeah, that's where I'm going to end it. So thank you for spending time with me, guys. If this episode hit something tender for you, know you're not alone. And hey, go be a little softer with yourself today. You're doing better than you think. Until next time, guys, as always, bye.